their story.
The following is CNN's coverage of a live event.
Hello from Washington, I'm Bernard Shaw. This is CNN's live coverage of President Clinton's second news conference early in his second term. At the White House, all is in readiness. We're told the president is in the waiting room, and on post, our senior White House correspondent, Wolf Blitzer. Wolf?
Bernie, we're told the president will open with a statement hailing the latest economic numbers, the job creation numbers for the first 2 months of this year. He'll then have a statement on the Gulf War syndrome, some new provisions, some new benefits for veterans who have been afflicted with the Gulf War syndrome. And he'll go through that. And in fact, there are some veterans who have been brought to this news conference to stand by. But once the questioning starts, no doubt the questions will focus on some of the other issues that the president probably won't want to discuss that much, although he is prepared to talk about the latest campaign fundraising questions that have been raised involving Vice President Gore, Maggie Williams, the First Lady's Chief of Staff, and other issues, amidst a growing call for an independent counsel, for Attorney General Janet Reno to come forward and to say that this is a good idea. At this point, the threshold has been met and that an independent counsel should take over this investigation. So far, the president has been strongly resisting those calls. He doesn't want another independent counsel. He has been frustrated by the last independent counsel. He's been burdened with the Whitewater independent counsel, Kenneth Starr, so he and his aides have been resisting that. But the pressure is certainly mounting on that, and a lot of the questions will no doubt focus on those issues that have come to the fore over these past several weeks. There probably will also be, Bernie, some international questions involving his upcoming summit with Russian President Boris Yeltsin in Helsinki later this month, perhaps on the Middle East peace process. But by and large, most of the reporters here are certainly going to try to get some news on these fundraising scandals. Bernie?
And Wolf, I suppose the president will have uppermost in his mind the advice that he got from his number two man, the Vice President Al Gore, who a week ago told him to control his temper and to stay cool.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
The president is now walking in, Bernie, and he's going to be taking these questions.
Good afternoon. Please be seated. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today we learned some very good news about the American economy. Our nation has created almost 600,000 new jobs in the first 2 months of 1997, almost 12 million since January of 1992. At the same time, the deficit has been reduced by 63%. Investment in our people has increased. Inflation remains low. Our economy is on the right track. But to stay on that right track, we have to balance the budget while we go forward with the work that leads to continued growth and low inflation. That's what our balanced budget will do, eliminating the deficit in 5 years and strengthening critical investments for the future of all of our people. Last week, the Congressional Budget Office certified
in the White House, and that the First Lady's Chief of Staff accepted a $50,000 campaign contribution in the White House. This comes on the heels of news about White House sleepovers and White House coffees for big money donors. You, sir, promised to have the most ethical administration in history. How does all of this square with that?
Well, first of all, let's take them one by one. I don't believe that they undermine the case. But let me begin by saying there were problems in the fundraising in 1996, which have been well identified, and the Democratic Party commissioned its own audit, did a review, made the results public, and took appropriate action. I think that is very important, and I'm proud of that. Second thing I want to say is, I thought the Vice President did a good job of explaining what he did and why, and explaining exactly what he intended to do in the future. With regard to Maggie Williams, I'd like to make a comment about that. She is an honorable person. She was put in a rather unusual circumstance, and as a courtesy, she agreed to do what the relevant regulation plainly provides for, which is to forward the check on to the Democratic National Committee. Now, in retrospect, with all the publicity that's attended the whole contribution issue? Would it have been better if Maggie Williams had said, look, I can do this under the regulations, but I decided I shouldn't do it, and I want you to go mail it in yourself or take it over there yourself? That would have been a better thing to do. And in the future, I expect that the White House will follow that course, should such an occasion ever arise again. But finally, I want to make the point I have been trying to make to the American people. We had to work hard within the law to raise a lot of money to be competitive. We did work hard, and I'm glad we did, because the stakes were high and the divisions between us and Washington at that time were very great. We still fell over $200 million short of the money raised by the committees of the Republican Party. The real problem, and the reason you have some of the questions you have, I think, unless you just believe that all transactions between contributors and politicians are inherently suspect, which I don't believe and I think is wrong for either party. The real problem is these campaigns cost too much money, they take too much time, and they will continue to do so until we pass campaign finance reform. If we pass campaign finance reform, as I've asked, by July the 4th, then the situation will get better. If we don't, we will still be raising too much money, and it will take too much time and effort on the part of everyone involved. So I'm hopeful that we can. But I believe that both the Vice President and Maggie Williams are highly ethical people, and I do not believe that either one would ever knowingly do anything wrong. This business of raising money takes a lot of time, and if you have to do too much of it, it will take too much time and raise too many questions. But I do not agree with the inherent premise of that some have advanced, that there's somehow something intrinsically wrong with a person that wants to give money to a person running for office, and that if you accept it, that something bad has happened. I don't agree with that. I don't think there's something intrinsically bad, but the system is out of whack, and I think we all know it, and we all know it's not going to get better until and unless we pass a reasonable campaign finance reform law. Helen?
Mr. President, Governor Romer said that Maggie Williams was wrong to accept the check, and you obviously seem to agree in retrospect. But in
No, I'm not going to say Maggie Williams did anything wrong. And I don't want to be, you know, you all will have to deal with this as best you can, but I want to be clear. She is an honorable person. There is a regulation that deals with this, which explicitly says that when something, if you receive a contribution and all you do is just pass it on, and you've been involved in no way in any solicitation on public property, and you're just passing it through, that is what the regulation provides for. It is explicit and clear. What I said was, I think that she would say in retrospect, and I would say, given the extreme sensitivity now everyone has to all these contribution issues, that she should have said to the gentleman in question, look, I can do this legally, but I don't want to do it because I think we should remove all question, all doubt. I think you ought to go mail it yourself, go take it down there yourself, and that's what I think the White House should do in the future if someone physically is present in the White House and attempts to do that.
Mr. President, in your zeal for funds during the last campaign, didn't you put the Vice President and Maggie and all the others in your administration topside in a very vulnerable position?
I disagree with that. How are we vulnerable? Because only vulnerable if you think it is inherently bad to raise funds, and you believe that these transactions are between people who are almost craven. I mean, that's how. I don't agree with that. Maggie Williams, in this case, was completely passive. She didn't ask someone to come in and give her a check, and she had no reason to believe there's anything wrong with it, with the check involved. She just simply did what the regulation explicitly provides for, which is to pass it on. Now, in the case of the Vice President, he can speak for himself. But I have to tell you, we knew what we were facing. We knew no matter what happened, we would be badly outspent. We believed in what we stood for, and we were, frankly, from time to time, we were surprised we had as many folks who were willing to stick with us as they were. But we are proud of the fact that within the limits of the law, we worked hard to raise money so that we could get our message out there and we would not be buried, literally buried, by the amount of money that the other side had at their disposal. There were the problems that we identified, which we've been very forthright about. We got an external auditor coming to the Democratic Party. They have taken the steps to correct them. But we had never faced anything like that before in American politics. And we did the very best we could with it. And I don't think we were compromised by fighting for what we believed in within the limits of the law. I do believe that this system is not good now. It is so expensive, it requires too much time, too much energy. And the more effort you put into it, the more opportunity you have for something going wrong. So what I think has to be done is we have to reform the law. But until we get some energy behind an effort to reform the law, you know, if it's just me and Senator McCain and Senator Feingold and a few others who support us for it, we can't pass it. And you will be left with the same system next time, and the time after that, and the time after that. And because of the exponential rise in the cost of buying airtime and other means of communication, we'll have all these questions all over again, time and time and time again. Go ahead. Well, Rita first, and then let's just do it that way.
I'm going to ask your forbearance because this question is a little bit long, but this is about Johnny Chung, the person who gave the check to Maggie Williams. In April of '95, about a month after he gave that check, he came in here to the White House. He brought in 5 Chinese officials. Someone on your staff sent a memo to the National Security Council saying that you were not certain you'd want photos of you with these people floating around. I wanted to ask you why you were worried about that, and also why, after a highly knowledgeable NSC official wrote back that he was a hustler who will continue to make efforts to bring in his friends into contact with the President, First Lady, and whose clients might not always be in favor of business ventures the President would support. Why did he keep getting back in here? What was your relationship to him? And he now says that it was at least implicit, if not explicit, that he would get this access for the money he gave.
Well, first of all, you asked me 2 questions, really. Why did I? Well, I'll answer the 2 I can remember. Then if I don't, Susie, you can ask again. I just had, as I have said before on this question of White House access, we did not have an adequate system here. I assumed, wrongly as it turned out, that there were kind of established procedures which were sort of handed on from administration to administration that had nothing to do with whoever happened to be here about that controlled and developed and access. And I was wrong about that. So that's what I assumed generally was in place until we became aware that they weren't. But on this particular day, I just had an instinct that maybe whatever the rules were, that we didn't maybe know enough about these folks to know whether that there should be a picture there. I didn't assume anything negative about them. I just thought that we just didn't know. Now, with regard to the memo about Mr. Chung, I can't answer that question because I never saw it, and no one ever told me it had been written, and I don't know who did see it. So I really can't answer that whole cluster of questions because the first I ever knew such a memo had been written was when it was discussed in the public domain. I did not know that. I had no reason to believe that there was any problem there.
And what was your relationship with Mr. Chung? How did you come to know him? How did he get into your office and write you letters that you replied to? There's lots of record of that.
Well, I like to think we're pretty good about replying to our letters, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I don't remember how I met him, but I think I met him at some Democratic Party event. I'm sure that's where I met him. I didn't have a relationship with him prior to my becoming president, to the best of my knowledge. Wolf?
Mr. President, early in your administration, when you were faced with a similar round of pressure for a special prosecutor to investigate Whitewater, you made it easy on Janet Reno by preempting her and saying, yes, it's time for a special prosecutor, Robert Fisk in that particular case, to go forward, and ever since, you know, the history of Whitewater. Why not make it easy for Janet Reno this time and similarly preempt her and say, yes, there's enough of a threshold, enough of the law has been met to go forward?
Because there was, for one thing, there was no law at the time. And I might point out that if there had been a law, either the previous law or this law, there would have been no special prosecutor because the threshold of the law was not met. And, you know, the American people will have to make a judgment about whether all this has been worth it when the facts come out. But the threshold of the law was not met, and I doubt very seriously if one ever would have been called if any law had been in place. Now there is a law in place. It is a legal question. I do not think it should become a political question, and I have been very rigorous in dealing with this and saying it in just that way, and I'm going to stick with my position. Peter?
Mr. President, you again today, Vice President Gore the other day, and your staffs have repeatedly told us that no laws were broken in the Lincoln bedroom issue, in the phone calls for donations, in Maggie Williams accepting and then passing along the donation to the DNC. But cumulatively, Mr. President, what are your thoughts on the propriety and the appearance of all of these various actions?
Well, let's take them one at a time. The Vice President has said that he believes he should, if he makes further fundraising calls as opposed to attending fundraising events, he should not make them from his office, even if it is paid for with a political credit card. I have said that I believe Maggie Williams thinks, in view of the environment in which we now are, that even though there is an explicit regulation on this, right on point on this, that, you know, what she probably wishes she had said and what I expect future employees to say is, look, I can take this, it is legal, but we're not going to do it this way. You have to mail it in or you have to take it in yourself. On the third thing, you know, I just have a different view of this than you do. I have done something no president has ever done. I gave you a list of the people that spent the night in the White House. And it shows that a relatively small percentage of them, about 1 in 9, were people that I met in the course of running for president, who supported me for president, who either gave me contributions or also helped to raise money for me. You know, the people that did that, I'm grateful to them for doing that. I appreciate the fact that they helped me in that campaign in '92. And the document which was released, which most of you reported on, which showed the note I had sent back to Nancy Hernwright, makes it clear that I wanted to get back in touch with those people. I appreciated what they had done. I didn't want them to feel estranged from me. And I don't think there's anything wrong with a president, me or anyone else, reaching out to his supporters. And some of them, including, let me just give you, I could give you lots of examples, but there have been a lot of different kinds of people who spent the night here. One of the newspapers made an issue of B. Rappaport from Texas. Well, he was my friend 25 years ago. When I was a defeated candidate for Congress with a campaign debt that was almost twice my annual salary, he was my friend. When I was the youngest former governor in the history of the Republic and nobody thought I had any political future, he was my personal friend. I don't think there's anything wrong with having people like that spend the night with you. So, you know, you can make your own judgments about this, but I have tried to be very forthright with you about this. I've given you all this information, and you can make your own judgments, but I just simply disagree that it is wrong for a president to ask his friends and supporters to spend time with him. And let me remind you of one problem. A lot of you who have to travel around with me are acutely aware of this. This job, even when you're traveling, can be a very isolating job. Usually when you travel someplace, you go someplace, you stay a little while, you turn around and leave. If you go to these fundraisers, they're on the coffees, for example, I'm the one that's most responsible, or for the dinners out, you know, the fundraising dinners. I get frustrated going to meetings and going where all you do is shake hands with somebody, or you take a picture, no words ever change. You never know what somebody's got on their mind, or they never get a chance to talk to you. You never have any real human contact. Now, I look for ways to have genuine conversations with people. I learn things when I listen to people. But I can tell you this. I don't believe you can find any evidence of the fact that I had changed government policy solely because of a contribution. It's just that I don't think I should refuse to listen to people who supported me, or refuse to be around them, or tell people, well, you contributed to the campaign, therefore, even though I'd love to have you come see me at the White House, I can't do it anymore. And you'll just have to sort through that and evaluate whether you agree with that or not. But that's how I feel.
Are those who question the propriety off base? Is that what you're saying?
Well, no.
To say that everybody else does it.
No. No, and I'm not trying to say that. I'm going to try to get through this whole press conference and never talk about the practices of the Republicans. I'm going to do my best to get all. I don't think that's a good example. And I also don't think it's good enough to say it is legal. I think we should be held to a higher standard than just it is legal. But what I do want you to know is when it is obvious that we have
Is humor something that's always come naturally to you?
No, I have to work at it. Comedy is, my friend P.J. O'Rourke says, anyone can draw a crowd by saying, I have cancer, but it takes skill to do 5 minutes of stand-up.
Humor was obviously a risk that President Bush was willing to take with you, since you were a speechwriter with him for a while. Now,
But I didn't read my lips.
perhaps a little more humor might have been in order
Well,
for George Bush.
George Bush is a very funny guy. He's, so is Bob Dole.
Yeah, well, but they didn't allow humor into Bob Dole's campaign, and this was part of the problem, I think.
It didn't come, unfortunately, Dole's humor didn't come across until he did the Letterman show the Friday after the Tuesday he lost, and everyone was reminded once again of what a really funny guy he is. Letterman said, so what have you been up to, Bob? He said, well, not enough, apparently. I have my Bob Dole pen.
It's a great, humor is such a great bridge that between people that I'm surprised that we don't see it a little bit more.
Oh, there's a lot of humor out there. We live in funny times. So there's an old traditional Chinese curse that goes, may you live in interesting times. You could almost change that to, may you live in humorous times.
Yeah, and Why I'm Running is one of the essays in here I really absolutely loved, and I wish we had time to read that. It's a paradigm.
Well, I still think you should preempt the president's press conference.
Yeah.
Let's spend the whole afternoon
if it gets a little
reading
dull,
my book aloud.
we'll come back to that. Now, I understand, thank you for Smoking is being made into a movie?
Well, Mel Gibson bought it, and they got the person who wrote the screenplay for Pulp Fiction to write it. So who knows? Hollywood's it can be a slippery world out there, but hope springs eternal. You can sell a lot of paperbacks if they make a good movie out of your book.
Yeah.
Just ask my friend Winston Groom, who wrote a little novel called Forrest Gump.
Yes. Well, we wish you luck on that. You got off easy here with this book, kind of compiling essays and such, and this one, when can we expect another real book?
Well, no, you mustn't say that, Bobby. It's actually, we wanted to put a band on the cover of the book saying, all new material by the author of Primary Colors, but Joe Klein blew it for me.
Another one coming out soon, though? I mean, a novel? Or?
Yes, called God is